This is a story about how anti-smoking advertising quadrupled the effectiveness of getting smokers to give up smoking. So there have been lots of stories in the past about integration, whether it be brands or channels or products, but this was the first time that actually there was a story about the integration of advertisers, so 3 advertisers coming together to tell the same story but from different angles.
Smoking today causes 80,000 deaths, and it's the biggest cause of health inequalities in the UK today, and it costs the NHS £2.7 billion per annum.
So in 1998, the government published the white paper Smoking Kills, in which they set out clear targets to reduce the prevalence of smoking from 28% to 24% by 2010. This was by no means an easy task because we had to fight the power of addiction. We had to get people to give up for good because it takes the average smoker 5 to 6 times to give up. We also had to fight against the power of the tobacco industry, who were spending a lot of money on advertising their product. And finally, we needed to do it in a way that didn't alienate smokers or upset people too much. We couldn't be too heavy-handed.
Well, we recognised that information alone wasn't enough to do the task, and that the government, through the NHS, needed to put in place access to national support services and clinics, and to give people wider access to products.
So behind the NHS brand, we provided 4 services. There was the NHS Stop Smoking helpline. There were local stop smoking services where people could go for help and advice and medication to help them give up. There was a website, and we also created a very innovative programme called the Together programme, which was a personalised programme to help take people through giving up smoking step by step. The focus for stage 1 of the campaign was health. In essence, 90% of smokers give up because of their health, so we wanted to look at the emotional and the physical consequences of smoking on your health.
We call it throat cancer. They've come in and removed my voice box. Before we did this, they found out I got lung cancer as well. And the future plans right now are Alexander, my oldest, is coming over here for holiday December 13th. I will be alive for that.
Testimonial campaign was a really incredibly successful campaign, and it was a pleasure to work on, but it was also very times upsetting to work on because we were working with real people who in many cases knew that they were dying. But the great thing about the campaign, and the reason why it works so well, is in essence what it does is it takes people and uses them as mirrors for smokers. So it presents people with a future image of themselves and where they could be. But the other thing that was really powerful about them was that we could use different people to talk about different messages. So we had some messages that talked about new diseases. So, for example, we featured Janice and talked about chronic obstructive pulmonary disease.
My name's Janice. I'm 51. The reason why I'm so breathless, the reason why I've got the tube, is for oxygen. This is me for the rest of my life now.
We talked about how smoking can actually cause a stroke with Jack. We also then talked about other issues like age, so the fact that smoking can kill you much younger than you perhaps thought at the age of 34.
My lung was infested with a tumour. I have had to have a major operation and they have taken the lung away. And this is all due to smoking. And at 34, you're thinking, oh, I shouldn't be going through this.
But also we use testimonials to focus on how smoking doesn't just affect you, but it also affects your loved ones. So Colleen talked about the fact that she may never actually end up having grandchildren because she knew that she was dying. And Rebecca talked about how her father was also dying from smoking.
Dear, why has your dad had to have a major operation?
Because he had lung cancer caused by smoking.
That sounds horrible and scary. But what happened to you when your mum told you that?
I felt worried because I've always associated cancer with death. I thought my dad was going to die.
What are you thinking when you look at that?
He's changed. His hair, the way he looks really weird now. He looks happy there.
He's very brave, isn't he? And you're very brave too. What have you... OK, that sounds strange, but what have you learnt from all of these things that have been going on?
Don't smoke. I can smoke.
If you want to stop smoking, call 0800 169 0169.
So just taking the testimonials campaign as an individual strand, it was incredibly impactful and very successful. We achieved 93% recognition rate and actually doubled the number of smokers who were actively giving up at any one time. There's no silver bullet when it comes to getting people to give up smoking. We knew that 76% of smokers needed more than one reason to get them to give up smoking. So what we did was we looked at a range of different messages and motivations that would collectively work to help them to give up smoking.
So as a result of this, we decided to build a coalition of different brands who would communicate in an integrated way with the public about the dangers of smoking.
So we worked in conjunction with the British Heart Foundation to talk about how smoking can damage the heart, and also with the Cancer Research UK to focus on how the tobacco industry has been creating various lies and ruses to encourage smokers to smoke more. The third new message, which was about the damage of smoking to children, was really appropriate for the NHS because it was very much about protecting and looking after children. So that was how the three could work best together.
We constantly look at what's happening and take from international best practice. And one of the key findings was that the messages to the public, it should come from different organisations with different brands and different voices and tones.
And we learnt from primarily Australia and Canada and the United States that there were three new strategies that we should explore. The first one was a quite hard-hitting, shock-based campaign that was based in Australia, which was all about the effects that smoking is having on you right now, this very, very second. The second came from the States, which was about industry and exposing the things that the industry do to try and encourage smokers to smoke more. And thirdly and lastly, again from the States and from Canada, was the effect on others. So the effect of passive smoking on kids particularly and how damaging that could be. So Cancer Research UK worked with BBH, the NHS worked with AMV BBDO, and Euro RSCG were the agency for the British Heart Foundation.
We wanted the British Heart Foundation to make the link between heart disease and smoking in a powerful graphic way.
The creative idea came about through a series of, I guess, iterative conversations between the campaign team and the creative department. So one of the things that we had uncovered during all of our research for the campaign was the fact that there's a museum of pathology that's based at the Royal Free Hospital in London, and it basically stores all the pickled remains of ex-smokers. And that's where we found all of these sort of hideous images of atherosclerosis, which is what happens to your arteries when you smoke too much, when they clog up. So we got to this idea of the fatty cigarette, of basically making this inextricable link between the fat in your arteries and what happens when you smoke, and we just put the two together.
So how's the job? We've all tried to give up smoking. It's hard. But every cigarette we smoke makes this fatty stuff get stuck in our arteries. This much was found in the artery of a 32-year-old smoker. Our hearts can't work properly if our arteries are all clogged up.
The thing I like about it most, I think, is its, if you like, its humility. It's kind of a very unshowy commercial. And there's a tendency in this category, especially charity and public service, for the commercials to come on like a kind of precocious child. And here was a very low-key, a very adult-to-adult conversation, really. And it was that very everydayness that when they do drop the kind of the visual bomb, which is the fat coming out of the cigarette, which I understand was achieved using humus, it's even more shocking. And the kind of everyday way she kind of tries to rub it away, I think reinforces the sort of passive damage that cigarette smoking does. It's a kind of everyday, it's a routine thing, and you've let it become commonplace in your life. I think it's a really top-notch commercial.
One of the ways in which we thought we could make it work most powerfully was if we didn't try to persuade people into quitting smoking, but if we essentially tried to evoke in them this very strong Pavlovian response, something truly kind of guttural or emotional. And so we had this idea that every time somebody lit up a cigarette, the only thing they could ever think of was this sort of fat dripping out of the cigarette. So we had to create this very tight link between the fat idea and the cigarette idea, and in doing so, we'd basically tie the two together.
The smoker was often demonised in other commercials. You know, you're an evil, bad, selfish person, or you're just hopelessly weak. Here, it was the cigarette that was the bad guy, and I think that was quite an innovation.
There was a very clear increase in the understanding of the link between smoking and heart disease, which was something that we knew didn't exist prior to the campaign. Moreover, people were sort of spontaneously sort of talking about the concerns they had about smoking and heart disease, and specifically around clogged arteries, which was a completely new thing which had never popped up in sort of tracking before. Despite not actually being built as a responsive campaign, it turned out that the British Heart Foundation campaign was incredibly responsive. So we got 12,762 calls, over 83,000 hits to the website, and we ended up distributing nearly 30,000 booklets to people concerned about smoking and heart disease.
We thought that Cancer Research UK were really well placed to inform the public about some of the misleading descriptions on product packaging, for example, light or mild cigarettes.
Well, the Death Repackage campaign came out of a piece of government legislation that was going to stop cigarette companies describing their products in very mild and low-tar ways and trying to make them more acceptable. And the campaign idea was very, very simple. We made an analogy between a vicious animal, because you might give it a nice name, doesn't actually make it any less dangerous. When we launched that campaign, the awareness of this problem was something like 40%, and after the campaign we were at something like 72%. So it was a very successful way of getting people to rethink mild and low-tar cigarettes.
The NHS message was that smoking can do damage to your loved ones by being around you as a smoker.
One of the key things we wanted to focus on was the damage that secondhand smoke can have on children. And we developed a really, really impactful campaign around the idea that if you smoke, I smoke if I'm a child.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are. Up above the
If you smoke around children, they smoke too.
like a diamond in the sky.
Every year, thousands of children have to go to hospital because of breathing other people's cigarette smoke.
So the Smoking Kids campaign was very, very successful, both in terms of awareness but also in terms of changing attitudes. So at the beginning of the campaign, 28% of people agreed that secondhand smoke was a danger to children. But after the campaign, 56% of people agreed that secondhand smoke was very dangerous for children. So not only did the campaign change attitudes, it also changed behaviour. We actually saw an increase in the number of people claiming that they'd given up smoking inside the home, so that it increased statistically significantly from 45% to 49%. And I think it's really, really successful when you create something that is amazingly powerful that then gets the whole nation talking. So I remember when we did Smoking Kids and we had not only the great big TV ad out there with the kids kind of breathing smoke, but in combination with the 48-sheet posters, it just really created a sense that there was this new news that everyone was talking about. You know, in the past, people just hadn't really thought about smoking around children, whereas now it became a really, really big issue. So even though each of the strands of the campaign performed incredibly strongly individually, actually it was the additive and complementary effect of them all working together that was the real power behind this campaign.
It enabled us to reach a far broader range of smokers. So you had some smokers who would be more engaged by some parts of the campaign than others, and in aggregate that meant that we could talk to more of them. But also what it meant was, because we had 3 strands, each giving different messages, essentially we were giving people more reasons to quit. So we succeeded not only increasing the breadth of the campaign, but also the sort of depth with which it worked as well.
Well, this campaign should have been a horrible mess, because it's a coalition of very different people with a stake in the problem, and I think what they very cleverly did is they all found their voice and then as a collective created, I think the paper describes it as a bigger noise cloud around the whole issue of anti-smoking, but with each brand saying something entirely appropriate to their branding.
The really important role that television had to play within this campaign was it gave us the scale and the impact to create the talkability that this kind of advertising really, really needs. We had saved £170 million in terms of reductions of costs to the NHS, in terms of reduction of sick days, and also in terms of reductions of house fires. And we actually beat our target 3 years early. So for the advertising to pay back, we would only have had to have got 7,661 smokers to quit. In actual fact, over the period of the campaign, we got 1.1 million smokers to quit. So the most important result for me from this campaign was that there were fewer smokers.
Just a routine chest X-ray?
Just a routine chest X-ray that showed it up. They're talking months, and not a lot of them. Just think of the consequences.
Advertising is a crucial weapon in terms of driving behaviour change. It'd be naive to say it was the only weapon, but the policymakers can obviously deploy taxation and legislation and pricing, and we can configure services. But without advertising, creating those really emotional prompts and really informing people as to why they should quit and how they should quit, none of these would have such a great effect.
The whole anti-smoking story has been that when you tell that story emotionally rather than rationally, it has such extraordinary power, even for non-smokers. And I think that's a lesson for all advertisers rather than health groups, that stories told with emotion land harder, live longer, create more profound change in people than just information.
One of the clear learnings from the IPA data bank from Marketing in the Year of Accountability is about the role of emotion and its power to make people change their behaviour. And I think this is a great example of that in practice.
I think the legacy for this campaign is its real proof that actually advertising can have really positive effects on society and can cause mass behavioural change and save lives.
You know, as an industry, we're often accused of selling things to people that they don't want, and that's a common complaint about our industry. And there are 1,000 ways of answering that. But one of the other things that our industry does and plays a huge role in is getting people to alter their behaviour in terms of social need, in social awareness. And as we live in an incredibly complex society with problems being thrown up all over the place, advertising's role in helping people manage their way through that and governments to explain policy, I think, is fundamentally important and one thing that's going to go on growing.
Campaigns like the British Heart Foundation, driving safety, 30 miles an hour, that sort of thing, they have achieved profound behavioural change. And I think, commercial advertisers should look at the public sector sometimes and think, what can we learn from that?
So when we started the campaign, only 8% of smokers claimed that advertising was the main thing that had forced them to quit. But at the end of the campaign, that had quadrupled to 32% and had become even more powerful than advice from friends or family or visits and chatting to the GP.
And we have built the consortium approach into different campaigning strategies, for example, around stroke or around alcohol, and most recently on Change for Life, where we add different voices and different brands to the NHS brand, talking about the different health harms. The big insight that we're working to in our advertising and marketing at the present moment is that smoking is the enemy of the family. And we're working hard to communicate that not only is the smoker doing danger to themselves and harm to themselves, but they are also causing huge anxiety to their loved ones and to the people that are round about them by smoking.
Hey Mum, I know you're watching Emmerdale, but I just wanted to give you a quick message. Could you stop smoking, please? Because it makes me feel upset, because I can see the smoke going through all your body and your lungs, and it's going to feel like your lungs are going to break or something like that. So could you stop smoking, please? Can you just do it for me?
We use direct marketing techniques to make sure that we can offer people a wide range of help and support once they've decided that they want to make a quit attempt. So we will offer them access to a local stop smoking service. We will offer them help and support over the phone or by text. We can make sure that they get to see their GP if that's what they want to do. And most recently, we've created a whole innovative product called the Quit Kit, which is help and support in a box for someone who wants to stop smoking. Today, 8.6 million people still smoke, so we've reduced overall smoking numbers by about a fifth since 2004, but still large numbers of people smoke. There'll be an ongoing role, there has to be an ongoing role for communications and marketing in terms of communicating the health harms, but also making sure that if people do want to quit, that they know where to go to get the right support and the right services to help them to quit.